Hey everyone, so Brandon Sanderson just dropped a video called The Voices of the Cosmere by Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. I have no idea what this is. I haven't looked at the video description at all. I just saw that it was going live in a couple minutes, so here's my reaction.
In the middle of the ocean, there was a girl who lived upon a rock.
So Tress.
This was not an ocean like the one you have imagined, nor was the rock like the one you have imagined. The girl, however, might be as you imagined, assuming you imagined her as thoughtful, soft-spoken, and overly fond of collecting cups. Men often describe the girl as having hair the color of wheat.
I wonder if this is going to be the whole video, just
or occasionally the color
sneak
of honey.
peek into Tress.
The girl wondered why men so often used food to describe women's features. There was a hunger to such men that was best avoided. No, let's do that again. Hi, I'm Michael Kramer.
And I'm Kate Redding. So the first...
I don't think I've ever seen Michael Kramer and Kate Redding before.
...were paperbacks that arrived in a cardboard box with the instruction to just get them recorded when we could.
Yeah, I think we got the first 5 or 6 at once, and they were about that thick each, and it was like, oh, okay. And what was unique about the situation was Robert Jordan insisted that he have a male and female narrator for the different points of view, and that was, at that time, because of the technology, not done at all.
Did they do Wheel of Time? I listened to the first 2 books.
At that point, it was books.
And I didn't realize it was the same narrator.
From Sigrid.
Narrators, plural.
Hecht, and she said, "Are you guys available? We're thinking of giving you this series, but the author wants, male and female points of view. So, are you good with that?" And sure. And then this box of books arrived.
And that was in 96?
96, yeah.
So at the time, we were working with Grover Gardner. We would go to his house in Mount Rainier,
for his
and
studios.
he had a couple different booths set up. And that was where we were going to do our commercial recording. And the machine that we were recording on at the time was an ADAT, which uses VHS tape that you format into 8 tracks, and you stick this cassette into the machine, and you record 8 hours of material. And if the machine eats your tape at the very end of the 8th track, you're done.
Whoa.
There's no backup, there's no saving, you just lost it all.
Right.
Unless you can gently tease the tape out from the gaping maw of the ADAT machine, straighten out the crinkles, and hope. And we would FedEx those tapes.
That sounds like a nightmare.
To the engineers at Books on Tape.
Right. We had to actually...
Oh, we burned... Did we burn CDs?
No, we burned cassettes.
Oh, God.
First. We had a dual cassette player, so it could record 2 different tracks at once. And so at the end of, when you finally filled up the tapes, you would burn all the tapes, all the tracks onto cassettes, package those up, and send that with the ADAT machine, or the ADAT tape to, at that point it was California. Yeah, that was the process.
All the details you don't think about, huh?
And so then, as Jordan kept writing the books, we would receive more, and eventually we moved into this house. We had a studio here that we could use. At one point, we had to get an extra booth because I was working in the one in the basement, in the old part, that was not very soundproof. So Michael got one of those vocal booths, stuck it in the guest room, carefully positioned over the load-bearing beam of the house.
Working from home.
So we could both record at the same time.
Gotta love it.
Because our work was increasing.
Right.
And it was becoming problematic to share a booth.
Right, but one of the reasons why they wanted couple to do the initial narration.
I just got that they were married.
There was no editing.
I didn't realize that they were actually married. And it makes sense, Michael and Kate.
Migrated somewhere. It was literally on the same tape. So when we came to change a point of view in the middle of a track, that other narrator needed to be there to just pick up right there and then do their section. And then it would be, passing the baton back and forth. And for the most part, it was chapters. It was not a big deal because it would be, okay, I'm done with my session because I've done whatever, 45 minutes, an hour today. But when you get to the end of those books, all of a sudden it's 2 pages here, 3 pages there, 4 pages here, 1 page here. And so literally we would be high-fiving each other as we went back and forth. And we had 2 kids at that point, we had 1 kid for one and then 2 eventually. And it was like, okay, you got the kids? Okay, I got the kids.
Man, that's crazy. That's pretty cool, though.
When we divided into 2 studios,
surprised the high five didn't come through on the audio.
The first set of books that I narrated.
Sounds like they weren't able to edit that out back then.
Upgraded into the vocal booth was the Mistborn series, because we had just they had just announced that Brandon was going to complete the series, and this was
The Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time. This was in 2008, and they said, okay, we have somebody to finish, but before he finishes it, we need you to do his Mistborn series. I was like, okay, and we had never met. I was like, all right, and also, and start with book 3. Oh, okay, not book 1? No, book 3. Oh, all right, fine. But yeah, that was the first book that was recorded in that new studio space.
In the studio, the new.
When it was. Yeah,
probably, I wonder if 3 was about to come out, so they wanted them to record it sooner.
Space that we use today, so we had that booth, in what is essentially the master bedroom, up until we had finished that, because we knew we were going to be building a separate studio space. Just to improve the sound quality. After we started in 91, so after 18 years of narration, we thought maybe we're doing this full time now.
I wonder what they did for jobs
to Madison
before they went full time.
To the studio and kind of give you a general look at the room, the booths, and inside my booth. So this is the addition that we had built on to the house back in about 2008 or 9. And it involved tearing off an existing addition, which was an uninsulated workspace and half of a very crappy kitchen upstairs. And so we replaced it with a larger addition. We had to dig down so that we would have enough height for these booths. And
what booths?
These walls are cinder block walls. And when the guys were building them, they were just about to cap the tops of the walls so that they could start building the walls of the kitchen above. And I said, stop. And the contractor said, oh my God, what is it now? And I said, you have to pour sand down into the cinder block walls. So for 3 days, he had a guy sitting on top of the wall, pouring sand down into the holes of the cinder block. And what that has done is made it an amazingly dead space, sound-wise, and given us just that much more protection from outside noises.
I'd love to have a room like
maybe
that.
A helicopter going right overhead.
Can't afford it though.
Or a semi idling on the street, or somebody mowing a lawn but coming right up to the window.
Plus we rent.
Those are about the only things that we can hear through these walls, which are remarkably dense.
You have to put sand in the ceiling too then if the kitchen's up there?
Which is smaller than Michael's. So Michael's is 5x5 and mine is 4x5, which, since I'm about a foot shorter than him, seems fair. So when I get into the booth, I actually have, I don't know if you can see this, I have one of those little massage rollers on a cushion so it doesn't make any noise. And I put my feet on it. And in the very exciting moments when I feel the need to move, I can push down on this so that my body is feeling connected and engaged, but I'm not making any noise. Not making noise is like a huge issue in recording. So I normally would wear a knit t-shirt and jeans.
That makes sense.
Michael can't wear any collared shirts because his stubble scrapes against the collar and makes a noise.
Things you don't
that
think
the
about.
microphone picks up. So you're very limited in terms of wardrobe. We do our reading on our iPads.
There's me,
It's
just
sent
go in your
in
underwear.
PDF. So right now what I have pulled up is a PDF of Way of Kings Prime, which we recorded for
Yeah, it's not.
Brandon. And that was the original story that he wrote that actually has, I believe it's never been, it was never published.
Imagine reading out loud Way of Kings all the way through and then being told, oh yeah, read it again, but the Prime version.
The Way of Kings Prime
They get paid.
session pulled up. And so this is the track that corresponds with Chapter 9. And the operating is really, why did I say operating? Operating the system is very simple because we have keyboard shortcuts. So if I put the cursor at the beginning here, then I can hit 0 for play, and I start hearing it. And if I want to stop, I hit 0 again. If I hit 1, it rewinds. If I hit 2, it fast forwards. And what we do is something called punch roll. So if I'm making a mistake, I would stop. I would go back to the previous sentence. See where there's a gap? And hopefully there's
When you take a breath, maybe.
And once I get into there, right about there, in between the end of that sentence and the beginning of the sentence in which I made a mistake, I would hit 3, which is record, and I would keep going. I would start going with the same sentence that I had to stop on.
Interesting.
That's kind of it. At the end of the session, there are a couple of editing things that you do where you go into edit, you select all, you go back to edit, you hit fades. These are not Wheel of Time fades. These are just smoothing out the edit noises that you made every time you stopped and started.
I need to learn to do that.
And once you've done that, you consolidate the clip and it sends it over to this window right here where you can see all the finished named clips. So when you send it over here, consolidated, then you rename it and then you clear out all of the outtakes. And so you end up with this. This is my part of Way of Kings Prime. So these are all my chapters. And that's it. And then you can send that WAV file. Some people use a file transfer program. Some people use Dropbox, WeTransfer, any one of a number of different ways of sending an electronic file. Audio files are huge, enormous. So you have to have a platform for sending them that will accommodate
Yeah, that makes
their
sense.
size. And that's it. That's where we are. And I think the first time we actually met Brandon was that at Arundel Mills?
No, I met him, I think it was just after he had done The Gathering Storm. And I met him individually. You were doing something else, and so I went downtown and we met at I forget who was interviewing us, but I think I had finished doing Mistborn, but because he was in the process of writing The Gathering Storm at that point, and they wanted to do kind of a kickoff interview session to launch, you know, the culmination, which at that point, that was the first of the three.
So they recorded Mistborn
and I can still
without
remember
even
we were
having
both
met
like,
Brandon.
Hi. And you know,
The Brandon
it was,
hi. Hi.
It was a fun interview. I mean, he's a very warm individual.
He is.
And he was hugely appreciative of what we were doing, and yeah.
So then he did a reading at Arundel Mills.
We did, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But Brandon was there for a book signing, and the
Right.
line was out down the
Right.
street.
Right.
And we showed up to do a reading, and I think that was the first time I met Brandon.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, you're so young.
Yeah.
It's really been amazing to collaborate with him over so many years.
I bet.
See all the changes in his life and in his writing.
Yeah.
While we're looking at all of the changes in the audiobook industry and in the
Thank
technology.
goodness he's young.
Because by the time we
We
finished
can
up
get a finished
the Wheel
Cosmere.
of Time books that Brandon wrote, by the last one, we were working in our new studio in the basement. Each of us has a vocal booth, and we're recording on software, on computer. So the risk factor is just gone. You
Right.
can save anything pretty much.
Right.
Digital
Companies
age.
they had the WAV files, you know, 3 clicks, and it's gone to California.
Right.
That
You don't have to send it in the
was a
mail
Books A
anymore.
Million, which is a huge, huge bookstore.
Where you
As-
met him.
Where we met him,
Uh-huh.
and as you're walking into the mall, because it's a big, huge mall, there is a line out the bookstore, through the mall, outside, of people waiting to get in.
Yeah.
Um,
The people in the store had no clue.
yeah, it was
They were like, "What?"
right, and so we did the reading, and then we divided into, we would be at one desk and sign stuff, and he and Harriet would be at another desk and sign stuff, and we finished the reading about 7:45, 8 o'clock, and then we signed things from 8 to 10:30. He was there till 1,
Yeah.
and he had another date at a different book signing place the next day. So I don't know how he did it with regard to all.
Didn't he stop doing big
the
signings
energy
like that?
he had to have, because it was just.
I'd rather
and
get
that was
his
from memory
YouTube
of
channel
mine, 'cause that
anyways,
was
get
when the final
a bunch of
one
it content,
came out. What
and
has
maybe
been
once be able to go
fascinating,
visit.
because to a certain degree we began the process of narrating his books, myself with the Mistborn series, and then with the Robert Jordan stuff, and then with several others, is to watch his development as a writer.
I bet that's
And to
interesting.
a certain degree, and I'm speaking as a narrator, there's, you know, it's both of those things are crafts, and you're always learning. Sometimes it's technique, sometimes it's like, why does it always fall flat here as a narrator? It's like, because you're doing this, this, and this, or you're not doing that. It's a bit like the, why did we not get the laugh tonight when I asked you for a cup of tea? Because you asked for the laugh. Ask for the cup of tea and you get the laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been really fascinating to see is as Brandon is now exploding in terms of just the output that he has, is the themes that he's really taking on and exploring. And I know that Kate can talk to, like, the development of the women's characters.
Really
in particular.
exploding. Surprising with the
What is fascinating to me is
Kickstarter.
just
They
to
were
see
looking at
the kind of
other
comfort
for other
that
narrators.
he's willing to challenge himself.
Surprised they still got
to take
Michael
on,
Kramer and Kate Redding for
and the team
3
that
of
he
the 4.
assembles around himself,
2 of
and
the
has
3.
assembled between the alpha readers, the beta readers, and the experts that he brings in as consultants. But I really feel like, as a writer, he's not afraid of any subject, and that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not stuck in a mold, which and I can say without a spoiler, I can say that these secret projects are going to be explorations of both style and different things that you haven't seen so far. And that's really exciting because part of it is, in a 57-hour book, it's great that you don't have to spend all your time in one particular tone, that you can explore different ideas. The characters have a wide range, and that has been really, really rewarding.
Brandon's never been accused of having diverse characters.
Brandon and going,
Of
who is
not
this
having diverse
12-year-old? Like,
characters.
how is this possible? And reading his early stuff, watching just how much richer and deeper and more complicated and more human and above all more funny, especially the women characters, have become over time, is lovely, because you feel like you're watching the evolution of the human being who's creating these stories. And I think he's, I'm not going to say fearless, because there's probably things that he fears, but very, very open, very courageous. I appreciate the fact that his characters make mistakes.
They do.
And
he does explore a lot of different topics.
Because I think that's where people connect with the story, is that they see themselves in these characters.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if a character is perfect. That's like God level, right? You can relate to someone who says something unbelievably stupid and is like smacking themselves in the face for saying that. You can be like, yeah, I just did that yesterday,
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I've always loved his sense of humor, and that's really going to shine in these projects, because
well, we haven't read two of the three of them.
Right, but
so Michael's read Tress. That's really the only one.
And I'm not going to say anything more
No.
other than it's going to be a delight. I mean, yeah.
It was really good. His work on Hoyd was great.
So this came out of the second generation of Mistborn. And first of all, that in and of itself was shocking, in the sense of you're continuing this world in a different generation. How, other than Star Trek, maybe nobody does that. So the idea of melding the fantasy world to steampunk and what that created, and setting it in that world, and the kind of all the fun he had. I did not expect the yellow journalism, the kind of sense of farce at times, especially the Bands of Mourning, and then when the Lost Metal comes out next week, you'll see that too. I mean, there's just this explosion.
So this was recorded a while ago.
Expanding the genre in terms of what you can expect to read. It isn't just magic and battles and this and that. No. It's humor, but it's also married to a whole technology, and the magic system is still intact, which is really challenging.
I bet.
But also very exciting. So I did not expect
Keeping
that,
track
and
of
I can remember
Holomancy and Feruchemy and
having to do the first
all those would
broad
be
sheet
tough.
in the Mistborn series and going, what? Oh, and just going, okay, I get to go back to the little narrator store and clear out all the shelves over here in terms of, you get to play this voice, you can do that, you can be silly, you can do all these different things. That as a narrator, you're not confined in this. This is, we're not in the fantasy genre box anymore. It's like, no, we're in the, I don't even know what box to call it, but it was so much fun. And that excites you, because it's like, breath of fresh air. And especially because the broadsheets are, 2 pages and now we're off, and back to the story. So that was rather totally unexpected, because I thought, how is he going to do this and make it different? And he really succeeded. I mean, he married steampunk, Western, and fantasy all together. It was
not a lot of people doing stuff like that with their
and
fantasy.
I'll let you talk about Rhythm of War.
Well, I
don't know many people doing futuristic fantasies either.
Like
so
when we were working on Rhythm of War, there was this new.
Not next, but it's coming down.
It wasn't brand new.
Era 4.
Everything is embedded in the characters, right? So it's long process developing. There was a new sort of heightened focus on the cost to some of these characters, what they had gone through and what it cost them. And again, I feel like it's a way of refusing to be contained within the epic fantasy brand that says basically, you know, these people don't really have feelings. They are noble, and this exploration into the cost was lovely. It was lovely, and I know there were times when I was crying. I'm sure there were times when you were crying. Well, he's a big crier.
Sanderson does it well.
Part of that had begun really in the prior one, because you're exploring, just to a certain degree, Dalinar's journey in that book was tremendously painful.
For you?
And this, to me, was a continuation, and also spreading it out, but also, again, challenging himself to explore different types of call them injuries, call them challenges, disabilities.
And facets of mental health.
Yeah.
I loved voicing Shallan's character because the split between her different personas.
That would be interesting as a narrator.
And the reason for it, that you keep, you know, it's like you keep circling around and around and around, and you're kind of getting closer to the source of the wound, but you're shying away, and just fascinating. And this actually ties in with the sense that we have gotten over the years, hearing from fans who kind of use us as part of their mental health toolkit, because our voices are so familiar to them. They've spent hundreds of hours listening, and for many of them, it creates a soothing and safe and comforting environment, combined with the content of the stories, which touches on the struggle to be human, which I think people really respond to, and certainly ties in with our decision to support our favorite charity, Books to Prisoners, which is committed to putting books in the hands of incarcerated people, many of whom have written to us to say, when I was incarcerated, that was the first time I encountered The Wheel of Time or Brandon Sanderson's books. And
That's
I feel
so
like
cool.
it's all connected. There's a reason epic fantasy is so beloved. There's a reason Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson are so beloved. And I think it has to do with this aspect of being human.
Right. When Memory of Light came out, that was when the third posted review on Audible, I can still remember it. I don't know if this person had received a copy ahead of time, but it was like within 3 days, and that was a 45 or plus hour book. But he wrote about how, as a teenager, he was dyslexic, and he was dropping out of school.
Who is this?
He felt
Robert
stupid.
Jordan or Sanderson, because he wrote.
He, to a certain degree, probably was abused just by his peers.
I'm assuming Robert Jordan.
And partly suicidal. And someone got him an audio book copy of The Eye of the World, first book in the Wheel
Maybe
of Time.
that's Sanderson. I didn't know that about
And he
his
started
backstory.
listening to it. And he started to really get into the story. I think it was probably one of the few positive things in his life at that point. And he said, I got so hooked on the story, and my mood changed. And then he was like determined, as he was listening to this, said, darn it, I'm gonna teach myself to read. So he went out and bought a print copy of the book and then followed along with his finger, because he was just, the story had so taken him that he was like, I am going to use this to learn how to go through the frustration of learning how to read. And he taught himself to read.
I did the same thing with Harry Potter in second grade.
And because he had taught himself to read, he graduated, got into college, got a career, got into a relationship, and now has a family. And he said, and this is as Memory of Light is finished, said, this
isn't Sanderson, my bad.
Saved my life. And that's the power of storytelling. And to a certain degree, that is what so much of epic fantasy is about. It's coming of age, it's redemption. And there is a certain amount of acceptance of, to a certain degree, we're all damaged. We all have disabilities. We all have fears and things that we have to overcome. And, in some cases it's called, the Forsaken, and in some cases it's called addiction, or it's called abuse, or it's called something else. And the fact that these stories can, connect you to a whole community of people who are invested in them and are so accepting of people in whatever place they are. And that is huge in this world right now. It's just very empowering and very exciting. So
we went
was
to
touching.
WhatCon.
I felt the emotions.
This year, and they invited us to be guests. And that was the first time we were really in person with a gathering of fans. And this obviously was a Wheel of Time con, but the overlap is almost entire, right? And it was very impressive. It was just a wonderful experience. And I kept thinking, over the course of the 3 days, it was kind of like, wow, you sort of, if you were to write down all of these directives, how to create a perfect society that had everything to do with how to be accepting of everybody in that society. And I'm like, and these people are walking around living those principles. And they're not written down anywhere. It just feels innate. And again, I feel like there's a connection between the types of stories, what they do for people, how people resonate with them. And it's lovely.
Yeah.
The spores were only dangerous if you got them wet, which was rather a problem considering the number of wet things that leak from human bodies even when they're healthy. The least bit of water would cause the spores to sprout explosively, and the results ranged from uncomfortable to deadly. Breathe in a burst of verdant spores, for example, and your saliva would send vines growing out of your mouth. Or, in more interesting cases...
That's it. Well, that was really good. That was actually, I say surprising. Brandon doesn't put out bad content, but that was surprisingly touching. I feel like that I could say the same thing for Tress when I read it, and for Lost Metal. They hit a part of my psyche and my emotional state more than I thought they would. I expected them to be fun, and they resonated more. And people who think that Sanderson doesn't write good characters or shallow characters, I don't understand. They're just so deep. But it's really cool it was a little trippy listening to this with Michael Kramer and Kate Redding listening to them talk and hearing the voices that I've listened to for so many times. It was when Kate Redding was saying that it's a little bit therapeutic, and people use their voices in their books as a form of therapy. I'm like, I 100% identify with that. Hearing them is just soothing. It kind of takes you back, and now there's so much nostalgia with it after all this time. But no, that was great. Just amazing. This is my first time trying out a reaction video. If you guys think I should do more, let me know. Thanks for being here.